The world of Umamusume contains the stories of legendary Japanese racehorses, with the earliest horse in the global version being Maruzenski, who debuted in the 1970s, along with Symboli Rudolph debuting in 1983 and Sirius Symboli debuting in 1984. And in the later half of the 1980s, there were two racehorses that were both great that really set the stone or a precedence for the sport going forward. There was a belief or a stigma, or at least in Japanese horse racing, where gray horses would never make good racehorses. After the intense rivalry of Oguri Cap and Tamamo Cross in the 1980s, there was a big precedence of saying, well, maybe gray racehorses can compete at a national level or be some of the best horses in its generation. And after getting more into the game and the world, there's a lot of horses I feel like still are very unrepresented, or at least not as well known to the global version and its global players. And there's one gray horse specifically I want to go ahead and talk about today, something that I feel like was such a pinnacle portion of his generation that if he wasn't there, his generation probably wouldn't be as revered as it is now. We're going to be talking about none other than the consistent king, Biwa Hayahide. What makes him such an amazing inclusion to the game, as well as his relationship and possible history with his brother, Narita Bryan. Biwa Hayahide was born on March 10, 1990 at Hayata Farm in Koori, Fukushima. Biwa Hayahide's sire was the horse Sharud. Sharud would win 7 races, place second place 4 times, and place third 3 times. His mother and mare Pacificus raced in 11 races in her lifetime and only won twice, placing third 2 times. But what made Hayahide's mother so rare is that Pacificus was a direct child of none other than the Canadian racehorse Northern Dancer, and his influence on the thoroughbred industry is still felt to this day. Hayahide's trainer Mitsumasa Hamada remarked by saying Hayahide was a little weird. His proportions as a foal were quite weird, as his head was too big and his legs were deemed honestly too thick. But he wasn't really too worried about this because he knew that the Northern Dancer line and pedigree was already super rare in Japan. Hayahide's first year of growing up on the farm for a foal went pretty well, except he actually ended up getting injured by hitting a fence on the farm at about 1 year old. So bad in fact, it left a 3.9-inch gouge in his right forelimb in his metacarpal bone. And the gouge was so severe, it was roughly the size of a 10-yen coin. For instance, this is a 10-yen coin. And if it would have went 1 centimeter deeper in his metacarpal bone, it would have hit his tendon, and that would have proved fatal to him. After recovering about a year later when he hit 2 years old, he was moved to the Hamada stables to train with Mitsumasa Hamada. It was at this point Mitsumasa Hamada's worries about his head size kinda got a little bit concerning. The reason for this is he had a belief that if a horse's head was too big, it would cause his head to droop down when running, which means it would create insufficient movement in the front legs, which would basically end up needing a cramped posture for the runner, make the horse not be able to run very well. When Hayahide turned 3, they originally planned to have him debut at the Kokura race course in 1992, but Hayahide was actually suffering from an illness up to this point, and they were forced to actually have him debut at the Hanshin race course, in which Biwa Hayahide was overwhelmingly able to beat the second place runner by over 8 lengths. An absolutely crazy margin that would set the stone for the rest of his racing career. With this momentum, they would then enroll into the Momiji Stakes, an opener race in October, in which Hayahide would win victoriously over the second place runner, Silk Moonlight, by over half a length. With an opener race and a G2 race officially under Hayahide's belt, they then would qualify for the Asahi Futurity Stakes, his first ever race in Tokyo, as well as his first ever G1 race in his career. As expected, he would perform very well and get into a head-on the last 200 meters of the race, where he would narrowly lose to Elway Win by less than a head. Sadly, Hayahide's head was still not big enough. Despite this loss, Hayahide and his team kept their momentum, and they decided to enroll him into the Kyoto Tsushin Hai, a G3 race in Tokyo, where he competed once again with an absolutely formidable run, but sadly was able to lose just by a nose to the horse Minor Remark. With 2 races just barely losing by a nose, they decided to replace their current jockey Shigehiko Kishi with none other than Yuki Okabe. Which is interesting enough though, Yutaka Take was considered to be a replacement jockey for Hayahide as well, but they ultimately decided to go with Yuki Okabe. Their justification for this was that they felt that Yutaka Take didn't have enough experience as a jockey at this point in time in his career. And with the inclusion of Hayahide's new jockey being Yuki Okabe, they decided to enroll him in the 1993 Walkabout Stakes. This was Hayahide's first ever 2,000 meter race, or his first medium race. A lot of expectations were put on to see how well he would be able to perform. They wouldn't be let down though. Yuki Okabe and Hayahide ultimately proved really well. They were able to maintain their position very well throughout the entirety of the race, with Hayahide getting into a showdown on the final straight where him and Okabe would successfully win by 2.5 lengths. With this win fueling the fire for the future of his career, they decided to enroll Hayahide in the first leg of the Japanese Triple Crown, which was none other in the 1993 Satsuki Sho, the most important race of his career at this time, as this would have set the stage for him being possibly a Japanese Triple Crown winner. This race wouldn't be easy, however, as the #1 favorite was none other than Winning Ticket, with Biwa Hayahide being the second favorite and Narita Taishin being the third favorite of that race. To make matters worse too is that Hayahide was forced to start in gate 18, which is the farthermost gate in Japanese horse racing. With this being Hayahide's second race at 2,000 meters, it was kind of concerning whether or not he would have enough stamina to perform optimally well. The gates open, and the race starts. With Yukio Okabe knowing Hayahide's strengths, he decides to go ahead and get Hayahide positioned towards the front, along with the other pace chasers, where he would actually position Hayahide in the outside towards the left still. A smart move considering the fact he wouldn't want the possibility of him getting blocked. Going into the second straight, Hayahide and Okabe maintain their position in the front towards the left, with Winning Ticket towards the back in a late surger position, and Narita Taishin in the very back in the encloser style. Going into the third corner into the fourth corner, that's when the pack really started to get intense, as all the jockeys began making their moves to get their horses in position for the final straight. With Winning Ticket, Masato Shibata began to climb through the center to get Winning Ticket in position to go into the final straight, while Narita Taishin and his jockey maintained their position in the back. And Hayahide and Okabe began to make their move through the front of the pack and began to outrun and outpace the runners in the front. But this move came at a cost, as Masato Shibata and Winning Ticket began to make their move the outside directly to the left of Hayahide and Okabe. In a final burst of speed, Winning Ticket begins to succumb behind Hayahide, with Hayahide leaning. Then, Narita Taishin blazes through on the outside and is able to claim victory by a head over Biwa Hayahide and Yukio Okabe. This loss was bad on two accounts. The reason being, one, is Hayahide would never become a Japanese Triple Crown champion, and also the second fact is that Narita Taishin was rode by, of course, Yutaka Take in that race, meaning Hayahide's owner and Hayahide's team lost to the very person they decided not to employ as Hayahide's jockey. A very karmic loss, all things considered. And after this loss, Hayahide's team craved a piece of the Japanese Triple Crown, where they entered him into the 1993 Tokyo Yushin Derby, where once again, he'd be going up against Narita Taishin and Winning Ticket, with all three of them being the top three favorites of the race. And it was at this point that they would meet again that the rest of the JRA and fans of the JRA began to call them the B&W Trio or B&W Rivalry of the 1993 classic year. With all the runners lined up to the gates open, and they start. The start of the race was already concerning though, as the jockey Katsumi Minai riding the horse Multimax fell off just a few moments out of the gate. Neither Multimax or Katsumi Minai were injured, which is really nice. Hayahide maintained a set pace in the middle pack, while Ticket remained in the back halfway, with Taishin, of course, in the very back in his encloser spot. On the entry into the fourth corner though, Hayahide and Ticket were side by side accelerating past the front runner, with Taishin quickly accelerating up to both of them. On the exit into the final straight, the front-running leader, Amber Line, continues to lead the pack going into the final straight, where Winning Ticket begins to pace up in second place, with Hayahide quickly encroaching to third place, where Taishin attempts to break down the pack in the center, where Hayahide and Taishin begin to put the pressure on Winning Ticket and Masato Shibata, where Hayahide begins to outpace Winning Ticket to take first place. Winning Ticket proceeds to hold out and begins to accelerate again over Hayahide and Okabe about the 100-meter mark, where Narita Taishin begins to make ground, and where Winning Ticket is able to maintain speed again, with half a length lead over Narita Taishin and Hayahide, with Winning Ticket winning the Japanese Derby. In reality, Winning Ticket's jockey Masato Shibata had been trying to win the Japanese Derby for over 20 years at this point, and of course, on his 19th attempt on the horse Winning Ticket, he would succeed as being a Japanese Derby winner. This race was super important to Shibata as he dreamed of winning the race after watching Shinzan win the race in 1964. With Hayahide's Derby loss being the third consecutive G1 he's lost and placed second place in, they decided to focus more on his physical conditioning for the later half of the year. They would ultimately test to see how this would pay off though as they entered the Kobe Shimbun Hai, where Hayahide notably will be racing for the first time in his career without his Menko mask, or the red hood that he has been racing with. This ultimately ended up paying off, as Hayahide and Okabe were able to secure the win over the second place runner, Neihai Caesar. What's quite interesting about Hayahide no longer wearing his Menko mask too is a lot of people really began to realize just how big his head was. And strangely enough, Hayahide began to have a really big fan base with women in the Japanese racing industry. Women were such a fan of Hayahide's big gray head and his dark eyes that they said that he looked awfully handsome, or even somewhat calm or stoic in appearance in a way. Even some saying he looked really intelligent. I find it really interesting too because Oguri Cap also had quite a fan base with women as well. So maybe there's some kind of correlation between women liking gray racehorses that we just don't know about, or I don't know, maybe there seems like there's some research that needs to be done there. With Hayahide's training, Yukio Okabe's skill, and the team's hopes of being able to take their own piece of the Japanese Triple Crown, they finally entered into the 1993 Kikuka Sho, the last chance for Hayahide to obtain his own piece of the Japanese Triple Crown. And with the pressure mounting on Biwa Hayahide being the #1 favorite, with winning ticket the second, and Narita Taishin the third, would Hayahide finally claim his own piece of the Japanese Triple Crown, or would he succumb once again in second place, just narrowly losing? Along with holding a piece of the Japanese Triple Crown, Hayahide and his team would be competing for 111 million Japanese yen, which in 1993 was approximately 999,000 to 1.9 million United States dollars. They begin loading the horses into the gates, and it appears Hayahide is reluctant into getting into his gate position. With the urging of Yukio Okabe and the staff, they're able to get him positioned into his gate, where they then bring in winning ticket. With them all lined up to the gates, and with thousands of the crowd cheering for Hayahide to win, the gates open, and the race begins. As soon as the gates open, Narita Taishin appears to have a late start or trouble straight out of the gate. The pack gets condensed going into the first corner, where Hayahide and Okabe begin to make their move to get into position in 4th place, where winning ticket proceeds to position himself in the back as usual. Going into the second straight next to the crowd, they're cheered on by the crowd of thousands. Hayahide maintains his position in 3rd to 4th, with winning ticket in the back towards the later half, and Narita Taishin notably in the very end. Exiting the second straight into the 3rd corner, Masato Shibata and winning ticket begin to push up a little bit farther into the pack, possibly to not get blocked. Halfway into the second straight, Hayahide and Okabe maintain their position in around 3rd, tailing the frontrunner and the horse directly behind him. Narita Taishin and Yutaka Take overtake a horse in the very back. Going to the 5th corner, approaching the final lap of the race, the pack begins to condense, and Hayahide and Okabe are positioned towards the upper front, with winning ticket and Masato Shibata preparing to make their move for the final stretch. And on the exit into the final corner, Hayahide overwhelmingly takes the lead, where Hayahide and Okabe begin to widen the length by 3 lengths, then 4, then 5. With Hayahide grasping his hard-earned victory of the last race in the Japanese Triple Crown, a crown that he would now share with Narita Taishin and winning ticket. The BMW trio and rivalry of the 1993 classic year had officially been cemented in the annals of Japanese racing history. In winning this race, Hayahide had beaten the record speed set by Reischauer just 1 year earlier, with Hayahide winning with a record time of 3 minutes and 4.7 seconds. This Kikuka Sho win with Hayahide would also be the 3rd and last time Yukio Okabe would win the race in his career. And to make matters even more cooler, you could hear the crowd cheering Hayahide's name. Hayahide was then voted in to race at the 1993 Arima Kinen, where Hayahide would be entering the Arima Kinen as the #1 favorite. This wasn't going to be easy, however, as Hayahide was competing with some of the best runners of the past 3 generations, as they'd be going up against Reischauer, Nice Nature, Machikane Tannhauser, Vega, Mejiro Palmer, Winning Ticket, and even Tokai Teo. This race would also be the first time Tokai Teo has raced in 364 days. Despite Mejiro Palmer winning last year's Arima Kinen, he was only the 9th favorite, 2nd favorite being Legacy World, 3rd being Winning Ticket. The race starts well with Hayahide and Okabe in his trademark stair position in 3rd and 4th place, with Mejiro Palmer being the frontrunner setting the pace for the race. During the second straight, the pack maintained a formation with Tokai Teo, Nice Nature, and the rest holding the center in towards the later half back. They maintained this formation moving into the final spurt, where Mejiro Palmer had begun to have been overtaken by Biwa Hayahide, with Winning Ticket trailing just behind Hayahide. Past Mejiro Palmer, with Winning Ticket just a couple lengths behind him, Hayahide begins to break the lead into the final straight. And just when it looked like Hayahide would have the advantage, miraculously, Tokai Teo carves through the center of the pack, passes Winning Ticket, and catches up to Biwa Hayahide and Yukio Okabe. 100-meter mark, Tokai Teo maintains a lead of about half a length over Hayahide, and with Tokai Teo's jockey, Seiki Tabara, they win the 1993 Arima Kinen by half a length over Yukio Okabe and Biwa Hayahide. Tokai Teo's victory over Hayahide and Okabe was nothing short of a miracle, and everyone to this day still talks about it as one of the most defining moments in Japanese racing history. And despite this loss, however, Hayahide didn't lose popularity at all. Honestly, it kind of helped him. And in January, following right after the Arima Kinen, Hayahide was awarded the JRA's Horse of the Year award, as well as the Best 3-Year-Old Colt of the 1993 season. 2 awards back-to-back that were well-deserved. And with these exemplary titles and awards under his belt, Hayahide begun his 4th season, in which he would start his 4-year-old season with the 1994 Kyoto Kinen. Similarly to his debut race, he would win by a margin of over 7 lengths. With his overwhelmingly great start to the 1994 4-year-old season, Hayahide and Okabe would then race at the 1994 Spring Tenno Show, which they would once again going up against Narita Taishin and Yutaka Tage. This would be Hayahide's longest race in his career up at this point at 3,200 meters, as the Kikuka Sho was 3,000 meters. The start did not look promising, however, as Hayahide struggled to catch up to his trademark position straight out of the gate. He settled into his position with Okabe halfway through the race, and into the entry into the final 2 corners, he began to pass the frontrunner, Rubel's Act. This didn't come without a price, however, as Narita Taishin and Yutaka Take dashed and began to catch up with Hayahide on the final straight, in which Hayahide and Narita Taishin had to have a head-on, in which Hayahide managed to maintain speed and claim victory by over 1 length. And with after this victory, media attention really started to hit Hayahide and his team very hard, in a positive way. You see, Hayahide had a sibling that had debuted the same year, and that sibling was none other than Narita Bryan, under the same mother Pacificus, but with Narita Bryan's father being Bryan's time, was making waves in the JRA scene. Up until this point, Narita Bryan had officially had 5 wins in a row without losing. To make matters even more interesting though, is that the same jockey that fell off Multimax during Biwa Hayahide's attempt at the 1993 Japanese Derby was the same jockey that has now been riding his brother, Narita Bryan, and that jockey's name was Katsumi Minai. Biwa Hayahide had made such an important legacy at this point in his racing career, a lot of people were really noticing that Narita Bryan could just have as much potential as him. Media coverage for both Biwa Hayahide and Narita Bryan was so intensive that everyone was talking about the possibility of them racing at the 1994 Arima Kinen. It was a rivalry so many fans would want to see that was yet to happen in Japan's racing history. This media coverage then followed Biwa Hayahide and his team in the 1994 Takarazuka Kinen. Although none of his old rivals Winning Ticket or Narita Taishin would be present at this race, with the only other G1 winner in the race being Vega. Biwa Hayahide again would victoriously take his 3rd G1 victory in his career, while also setting a new record for the fastest Takarazuka Kinen time at 2 minutes and 11.2 seconds, beating Mejiro McQueen's time of 2 minutes and 17.2 seconds. And when officially with Hayahide having 3 wins under his belt, they then decided to enroll Hayahide in the Sankei Sho All-Comers race, which is a G3, which he'd be going up against Winning Ticket again, as Winning Ticket was now the 2nd favorite, with Hayahide beating Winning Ticket once again, with Winning Ticket coming in 2nd place, showcasing a rivalry that still remains despite Narita Taishin's absence. But at this time, a slight controversy hit Hayahide's team, or at least Hayahide's owner. Hayahide's owner actually planned to enroll him into the 1994 Autumn Tenno Show, and a lot of people in the JRA and in the media were hoping to see Hayahide race at the 1994 Japan Cup. Hayahide's owner claimed this was the best possible way for Narita Bryan and Hayahide to end up racing each other at the 1994 Arima Kinen. A lot of people criticized this move as people were hoping to see Hayahide race in the 1994 Japan Cup, in which fans already thought Biwa Hayahide was so strong, they figured he would have a good chance against international competitors. However, his owner decided against this and decided to enroll him into the 1994 Autumn Tenno Show instead. They claimed it would be the perfect preparatory race for Narita Bryan and Hayahide to meet at the 1994 Arima Kinen, which Narita Bryan at this point had officially achieved the Japanese Double Crown and was one away from being a Japanese Triple Crown legend, where Biwa Hayahide would be racing as the #1 favorite, with Winning Ticket the 2nd, and notably, Neihai Caesar the 3rd favorite. With the horses all lined up to the gates open, and the race begins. Everything starts off perfectly as fine as usual, with Biwa Hayahide beginning to make his immediate break into the undermost rail on the left, then settling into the center, with Masato Shibata and Winning Ticket settling just 1 horse length behind them. Hayahide and Okabe then position themselves in between the 2 horses in front, number 10 and the horse to the right of him, where Masato Shibata and Winning Ticket maintain their position on the outer right, or the outer right center. They maintain this formation for the entirety of the straight. Going to the downhill in the 3rd and 4th corner, Hayahide begins to speed up directly behind the runners in front. Uncharacteristically though, Hayahide doesn't manage to accelerate fast enough, and begins to struggle during the final spurt, and at the 300 meter mark, Yuki Okabe then gives Hayahide a slight tap with his whip. And at the 200 meter line, Hayahide still is failing to catch up with the runners in front, nor is he able to keep up with the runners directly behind him, where he barely is able to pass the horse next to him on the right. Hayahide begins to get swallowed by the pack, where Neihai Caesar claims victory by over a length, and Hayahide finishes for the first time in his career outside the top 2. As soon as the race finished, Yuki Okabe immediately had equine veterinary staff and an ambulance come to pick up Hayahide. He sensed something was wrong, and after an evaluation they discovered that Biwa Hayahide had suffered from a case of tendinitis in the later half of the race, with it commonly being known as a bow tendon. in which the tendons and the muscles separate from overexertion and possibly stress. And just 3 days after the race, they announced that Hayahide would officially be retiring from racing and shall never race his brother, Narita Bryan, at the 1994 Arima Kinen. And on November 6, in the fall of that year, Narita Bryan would win the Kikuka Sho, meaning he would officially be crowned as Japan's 5th Triple Crown champion in their history. And of course, a month later, on December 26th, he would also win the 1994 Arima Kinen, a hollow reminder of the possibility of one of the greatest sibling rivalries in Japan's racing history during the 1990s to 2000s generation. With this career-ending injury, Biwa Hayahide was then moved to the Nisei farm to perform as a breeding stallion, and with his greatest child being San MX, who won over 130 million yen from Grade 2 races. With his streak of finishing in the top 2 of 15 races he ran in, would make him the second longest in Japanese racing history, directly behind Shinzan in first place. And I'm proud to say Biwa Hayahide enjoyed his retirement, as there are a plethora of videos and photos that you could find both on YouTube and on Netkeiba about him and his time at the farm. There are also featured bits about Hayahide loving bananas as well, and in the year of 2020, Biwa Hayahide's age had begun to show signs. And on July 21st, 2020, he would pass away of old age at the age of 30 years old. And with Hayahide's peaceful passing, he would end his career with 16 races, 10 wins, 5 second places, and 1 fifth place. And with that legacy, Biwa Hayahide would officially become one of the greatest racehorses in Japan's racing history. The rivalry of Narita Taishin, Winning Ticket, and Biwa Hayahide would not be a thing or even nearly be appreciated if it wasn't for his role in it. Same with Winning Ticket and Narita Taishin. And it truly is a tragedy that we were not able to see what the race between Hayahide and Narita Bryan would look like. I personally believe Umamusume does a great job of being able to capture the relationship, as both in the game and the extended universe, they are siblings, something that is commonly not seen in the rest of the game. And both Hayahide and Narita Bryan will be very pinnacle characters in the Umamusume Star Blossom manga series as well. I am a big Narita Bryan fan, and I really liked Narita Bryan's character so much that I kind of never really paid too much to Biwa Hayahide. I kind of felt bad now that I'm looking back now, because after looking at Biwa Hayahide's legacy, I mean, racing in 16 races, and in 15 of them you either won or placed second in all of them, except one race, and that last race is the one you got injured in, and yet still was able to place in 5th place, bro. That's insane. That's a crazy achievement. Like, are we not going to talk about, like, from a racehorse perspective? That's crazy. As a Narita Bryan fan, I really feel like I can truly appreciate Hayahide and Narita Bryan a lot more now, discovering that their history together, as well as their potential reality that they could have had with each other too. I feel like I really can't appreciate Narita Bryan's character now without looking about the amazing career of Hayahide himself. And I really hope you all enjoyed this video as well. There are a lot of characters in Umamusume that are still very underappreciated, or at least their real achievements are not as well known to the player base. And I'm really glad that I was able to shine some light on Hayahide's. This series has been such a gem to me, both at like an athletic sense and also just a personal development sense, and also just an interest in Japanese horse racing in general, and just modern horse racing in general. So really, I do appreciate this series, and I'm glad to continue making videos on it and the horses themselves too. And genuinely, thank you so much for being so patient with this video. I've had to re-record so many lines in this video, as well as go back. I've lost footage from recording this multiple times. As you can see, I had to record in some parts where I looked different or I had facial hair just because I had to break it into chunks. By all means, educate me if there are some things that I didn't know or didn't mention about, or even got some terminology wrong. And if you enjoy this video, genuinely, go ahead and give me a comment or subscribe, whichever you feel about it, or you cannot, it's up to you. Thank you so much though, and I hope you have a good rest of your day and or night. Thank you very much. Peace.